Well, the photograph of the year in American politics was taken Friday night on January 6th. There were 359 days left to go in the year at that point on Friday night, but sometimes the photograph of the year happens early, as it did on January 6th, exactly 2 years ago. Here is the picture of the year from January 6th. That is a picture of Republicans attacking the Capitol, having been encouraged by a Republican president to attack the Capitol and encouraged by some of the Republicans inside the Capitol to attack the Capitol. It is, in its way, a picture of Republican politics in America at that time, 2 years ago. For the rest of the year, then, no more important photograph of our politics emerged. That photograph conveyed everything that Donald Trump had done to American government and politics in his 4 years in the White House. And that photograph conveyed what the Republican Party supported: an attack on democracy at the United States Capitol. After trying to attack and destroy democracy in the elections for president in individual states, including Georgia, where Donald Trump called the Secretary of State asking him to change the vote count, a phone call that was recorded and immediately provoked a grand jury investigation of Donald Trump, which, as of tonight, has been completed. We will be discussing the details of what happens next in that criminal investigation in Georgia of Donald Trump later in this hour with Andrew Weissmann and Neil Katyal. Here is the new photograph of the year in American politics, taken just this past Friday night on January 6th. That photograph tells us everything about Republican politics and Republican governance in America today. Republicans attacking Republicans, Republicans with no plan, descending into chaos on the floor of the House of Representatives when trying to do the single simplest thing that the House of Representatives does, which is elect a speaker. That is 64-year-old Congressman Mike Rogers, who will be the Republican chairman of the Armed Services Committee, lunging at and being physically restrained from Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, whose vote against Kevin McCarthy denied Kevin McCarthy the speakership on the 14th ballot. No breathalyzer test was performed on Congressman Rogers or on any of the other enraged Republicans who made their side of the aisle in the House of Representatives on Friday night look like a drunk driving demolition derby. Kevin McCarthy finally crawled across the finish line to win the Speaker's vote on the 15th ballot only because 6 members of his party, 6 Republicans, chose not to vote at all. So his winning margin over the now Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries was 216 to 212. Kevin McCarthy never got a majority of the House of Representatives to vote for him for Speaker. And so in the end, he got a majority of the members actually voting, and he was only able to get that majority of the members actually voting by having 6 Republicans not vote at all. That is the weakest entry into the speakership that we have ever seen. Kevin McCarthy made a series of deals over the course of last week with the Republican members who did not want him to be Speaker in order to eventually get their votes or get them to not vote. Some of those deals were formalized in writing in a new package of rules that will govern the House of Representatives for the next 2 years that was passed by the Republicans tonight. And that package of rules guarantees that this version of the Republican House of Representatives will be the worst Republican House of Representatives in history. The new rules guarantee that this will be the most irresponsible and reckless Republican House of Representatives in history. If you think you've seen them be irresponsible and reckless in the House before, you're going to see things you've never seen before. The Republicans have no real legislative agenda except to cut spending without ever specifying what the spending cuts will actually be. They have made it against the rules for the House to vote for a simple increase in the debt ceiling, as the House of Representatives has done throughout American history, thereby making it more likely than ever that we will finally find out just how much worldwide economic calamity and devastation ensues when the United States of America, for the first time in its history, hits its debt limit and defaults on its debt thanks to the Republican House of Representatives. Here is what the previous Democratic chairman of the House Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, had to say tonight about the new Republican rules of the House.
What I'm concerned about is not just what's written down here. I'm concerned by the backroom deals that Speaker McCarthy made with the Freedom Caucus in exchange for their votes. Like Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace said just this weekend, and I quote, "We don't have any idea what promises were made." Is this what the majority leader meant when he talked about a new day and transparency? You know, these rules are not a serious attempt at governing. They're essentially a ransom note to America from the extreme right. The same members of Congress who held this body hostage last week are the ones who ran interference for the January 6th insurrectionists who tried to overturn a free and fair election. And even the new Speaker of the House voted to overturn the 2020 elections. We couldn't even get a public acknowledgement from him on the 2-year anniversary of that horrific day, not even a tweet. It is clear that Republicans welcomed the election deniers into their ranks with open arms, and now they are reaping what they have sown. The insurrectionists are in charge. And the icing on the cake? A new subcommittee to push QAnon conspiracies and launch fake investigations into non-existent scandals. What's next? A rule requiring we all wear tinfoil hats?
More is being asked of the American voter, you, in the 21st century than ever before. Vote not just to exercise your right in our democracy, but vote because democracy itself is at stake. Vote because you have to save democracy. Those have never been the stakes in voting before. And beginning in the Obama years with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, to follow the legislative action in Congress, voters suddenly had to master parliamentary processes. Suddenly, everyone knew that the so-called reconciliation bill passing through the Senate doesn't need to clear a 60-vote threshold first. The budget reconciliation process had been around for decades. But most people in Congress didn't even understand it because they didn't have to, because governing was simpler then and more bipartisan. Then Republicans decided to make increasing the debt ceiling a worldwide financial crisis point instead of the routine business of the Congress that it had been for centuries, literally. You could have covered politics for the entire 20th century without ever hearing mentioned the words debt ceiling. Not anymore. And this year, we will all have to become experts in, new words, discharge petitions. Most of you have never heard that phrase before, but you will be hearing it nonstop this year. A discharge petition allows a bill to get to the House floor over and around the opposition of the Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy has already promised in writing to never bring a debt ceiling increase to the floor of the House. And so the challenge for Democrats and anyone who doesn't want to destroy the American economy and the world economy along with it will be to pass a debt ceiling increase through the House of Representatives without Kevin McCarthy's support through a discharge petition. If a discharge petition gets the majority of the House of Representatives, then a bill to increase the debt ceiling can be brought to the floor of the House through the discharge petition process, which is a very complex process to navigate. It is more complicated and more risky and trickier than any other parliamentary maneuver we have seen in operation, but it is the only road to sanity now in a House of Representatives controlled by what Congressman Jim McGovern just called the insurrectionists.